could you do me a favor? Could you press this green button? Just press the button. It works. Excellent. Right. Now, two big questions. What's that all about? That's our app. Just to check with you, who's already downloaded that app and has played with it? Excellent. There's people that are not on the payroll of Covestro that already downloaded. It actually is a lot of fun because you don't only get the information, but you can play around with it. And the other question is, presumably asked by you, what happens if you press that red button? We'll leave that to the end of the show, won't we? Because right now, we're going to start, okay? So, an official welcome. Welcome to Covestro at the Car Messe here. Covestro wurde ja 2015 gegründet and it is going strong ever since. It is a world-leading polymers company, ein Unternehmen, das Produkte herstellt und ermöglicht, die wir eigentlich überall in unserem Alltag finden. Und bei allen Entwicklungen will Covestro eines: to push boundaries of what is possible, to make the world a brighter place. Daher einmal eine ganz kurze Frage an Sie, quick question to you. What would make the world a brighter place from your point of view? What do you say, madam? What would make the world a brighter place? When in doubt, world peace always works.
When everybody is happy.
When everybody's happy. That's just as good as world peace. Thank you very much. Let's see here. Sir, what would make your world a brighter world?
More greener world.
A more greener world, so a more sustainable world, in other words. Thank God you're here, because we're going to talk about sustainability and fashion. Because I don't know about this jacket. You think it's a sustainable jacket?
Yes.
Good, good. Would be difficult if you say no, especially for you. Okay, so now, ladies and gentlemen, the serious background is, Sie können natürlich auch Fragen stellen. You can ask questions too later on with the upcoming keynote and the Q&A session afterwards, because innovation is always about co-creation, it's about communication. So, Covestro möchte erreichen, dass die Welt a brighter place wird. Und zwar in segments as automotive, construction, electrical and electronics industries, as well as wood and furniture, sports and leisure. Doch wie sieht sowas aus? What does this look like when innovation knows no boundaries? It is all present. It's in the office. It's right here. You're sitting on it. It's in collaboration with colleagues, customers, you look, and along the entire value-added chain. To say it more bluntly, if you say you can't make sustainability fashionable, or even fashion sustainable, and Covestro says, why not? Und wie sowas konkret aussieht, wenn man sagt, why not? Das werden wir jetzt erfahren, because now we'll be talking, in plain English or American, about green chemistry in the sportswear industry. Our guest speaker today loves a challenge. And the challenge here is to align performance products with green chemistry and sustainability. He's working at the Hohenstein Institute America as Senior Technical Director. He is said to have an impressive sustainability resume, and he has proven expertise in many areas that can add product performance while still having a positive impact on a company's sustainability profile. Now, in the past, while he was working at Nike, the sports shoes people, his focus on closed loops, greener chemistry, climate stability, water stewardship, and thriving communities. He led chemists and scientists focused on exploring innovative and sustainable materials and processes. So I welcome the Senior Technical Director from the Hohenstein Institute America, John Frazier.
Thanks, everybody. Now I get to play with this fine green button. I started out with a challenge today. I was going to wear a tie, and then I got here and I saw very few people were wearing ties. You guys were all very liberated, and I was very happy to see that, because a tie is definitely a challenge for me. So I want to talk a little bit about green chemistry and how you blend it into making materials and products. I have information on the slide. I'm not one of these people that like to read every word on the slide, and they didn't even give me a pointer, so I won't circle every word that I'm going to read to you. But I want to tell you a story, and I want to make people think. And I think at the end we have time for questions or come up and hassle me afterwards. So if you think about materials, they really have transformed our life. And people say those kind of sayings all the time. But if you think about all the things we have, you have a tire that can stop a multi-thousand-pound car hundreds and thousands of times. You have a pair of shoes that take thousands and thousands of steps a day for months at a time and are fashionable, light. You like to wear them. You have materials that are light enough to put on a plane to fly around the world, solar powered. So we're constantly looking for how can we make a product faster, how can we make it more cost effective, save money, and how can we do it quicker, and how do we make it smaller and smaller. So we have plenty of challenges there. And you really have to start to dig into the materials. Well, if you want to make the products innovative, you have to think about what materials you're making and how do they interface into the product design. And a lot of times we'll ask for lighter, stronger, all of these things that you see on the board here. And it would be one challenge if we were trying to ask for one of those properties. But sometimes we even ask for all of those in a single material. So you can imagine from where we've come, from wood and leather and mud, it's amazing what we can do with materials now. The problems that we have is that as we make more and more materials and more products that people want, as our population heads towards 9 billion people, you think about all the materials we make, all the waste that's generated, and you can't hardly go anywhere in the world and not see waste materials or some sort of a product that's washed up on a beach or has polluted the water. And we pollute water with manufacturing. We do it with products leaching chemicals out. The same thing with air. And not only we, but animals are exposed to chemicals. And how do we think about all that? How do we do it differently? Because there is a better way to do it. Oh, and one other thing is, as we put more and more chemicals out there in nature, they don't just stay where we put them. They distribute globally, and then they also end up in bioaccumulation. So they start in small animals or sediment and water, and they end up in the larger and larger animals, where some chemicals it doesn't matter where you are, whether you're in the Arctic or you're in China, you see the same chemical footprint. So if you look at our industry, and by our industry I mean the apparel and footwear industry, it's the same regardless of which industry we're talking about. There are thousands of individual chemicals at the CAS level number, individual chemicals. And then what we do is we make formulation, we make mixtures out of those. And literally that number is limitless. The combinations are incredible. And then you have countries. We have close to 200 countries that have chemical legislation, and of course, very few of them agree. And that's also one of our challenges, is how do we figure out what chemical regulations make the most sense and keep our consumers safe, but also keep our companies safe. Because when you get it wrong, people and the environment can be damaged, but also so can your company reputation. And then the way we make products also is a challenge as well. I wouldn't say most, but many products are made through contract manufacturing. So you have multiple tiers of manufacturing. And the further you get into it, the more likely you are to use chemistry, and the least likely you are to have great control over it. But like I said, there is a different way to think about it. How do you become proactive on what you're doing with chemistry? And a lot of companies have done this already. A lot of companies have already become proactive, tried to look at how they're using chemicals, how they're selecting them, where their products are going, what can they do around, and that sort of thing. But there are green chemistry principles, and there's 12 of them but I only like to talk about a few. One, with green chemistry, we're trying to choose safer chemicals right from the very beginning. So how do we make the best selection right from day one so that we can avoid some of the problems? And then how do we avoid the waste that's generated? How do we use every molecule that we are putting into a mixture so that we're not dumping out the waste at the end? And then what do we do with those materials? Are there different ways to source them? Do they always have to be from petroleum, or are there times where it makes sense for renewable content? So just trying to get people to think of different ways of making materials and products and choosing the chemicals they use. It's not saying that it's easy, because you have to be really proactive. It takes time to do these things, but in the long run, the more time that goes on, the more this is valuable, because as we head toward 9 billion people, more and more problems crop up that we have to deal with, and it's a lot easier to do it right the first time than to have to go back and retrofit something. But what I'm not saying is that it's easy. And what I'm not saying is that we want to give up performance. What I'm saying is that we need to be really engaged in how we select things to begin with. And then once we have something that works, sometimes that's still not enough. We need to figure out, how do we work with a supply chain in order to make something go. And it's hard to represent the collaboration that needs to happen to bring some of these products and materials to market, but it's at least a triangle. There's the true innovators, the formulators, the chemical suppliers, like the Covestros, who are out there and innovating and coming up with new molecules or new materials, a different way of doing things. And there's a triangle between them, factories, and brands. And I think we've all seen over the years really good ideas that people say, well, this is just ahead of its time. I think a lot of times they're ahead of their time because we don't have that triangular thinking. A lot of times, if we're not careful, we will invent something and then just think that the market is going to take it and run. And we can't do that. We really have to have connection at the brand level. We have to have a champion at the brand who thinks that's a good idea, who understands why it's a good idea. You also have to have a factory or set of factories who are willing to use this material. And again, you have to have all three at once, because if you break down between any of those three, you end up with something you've invested time and money and maybe a great opportunity, but nobody is taking it for making products. So really think about it as we innovate. It's not just in silos. We have to break those down. And of course, I have to give, I don't have to give, I wanted to give an example of Covestro. And one of the things that I think that they've done that I don't, if you work for Covestro, I'm sure you know it, but a lot of people out there don't. One of the big challenges with synthetic leather and coated textiles with polyurethane in the past has been around some of the solvents that were used to make a layer where it felt and performed the way you needed it to. As those regulations I talked about earlier continue to evolve and people become more concerned with the type of chemicals that are in their products, DMF has shown up on a target list. And what some chemical suppliers have done have just moved away from DMF to a worse solvent. Sometimes I'll move to benzene or something else that's as bad or worse. That's not innovation, folks. But what Covestro did was they were able to flip this chemistry and go with a water-based application and they had to work with suppliers in order to make it work. But it's a big deal because in the past, every type of material that used some of these solvents ended up with it trapped in the polymer, and then it would go all over the world. So this was a really big step, and not only did they do that, but they also were able to use 65% renewable content, so non-petroleum input. The plus sides of this is it's proactive. It will keep them ahead of regulations around DMF. And I honestly think that companies that aren't being proactive around DMF will run up against a time where it will be hard to put products out there. So on the bright side, Covestro was recognized with a Presidential Green Chemistry Award that's sponsored by the American Chemical Society and the US EPA back in 2000. And if you think about some of the places where synthetic leather and coated textiles are used, I just pulled some images off the internet, but you can start to see that it has huge applications. And one last slide, I can't get out of here without doing at least a little bit of a commercial. As we go forward and we're trying to prove new chemistries and bring new performance polymers and chemicals to the market, it's always good if a third party can help validate that. That's what part of Hohenstein does. Happy to talk to you about it afterwards, but it's not a commercial. And this is my contact information. I'm happy to take questions. Thanks, everybody. Almost everyone stayed awake.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So, John, when you just showed the football, or you say soccer ball, that reminded me of the World Championships in Brazil. The coating was made by the company that is now called Covestro. And see what happened, the Germans won. So actually, it pays dividends to do exactly as you proposed. Now, if there are any questions from the audience, we'll take them first, obviously, before we get into any chit-chat here on the stage. So if there's anything you want to know, just raise your hand. We've got 2 microphones. Your voice will be heard. Okay, there's right in the middle, so let's see who goes first.
So how do you see the end consumer in that whole game? Because tackling these topics towards the end consumer is quite critical, I guess. But he needs to pay the product by the end of the day. And how do you see that relationship, that marketing connection?
That's a great question. Where do we see the consumer in this equation? I think as there's a number of ways that the consumer are being educated right now. They see a lot of negative press around chemistry. That works for us, but it also works against us. The way it works against us is that everybody is afraid of every chemical now. We have chemophobia. But I do think we need good stories out there coming from third parties. I think we need good stories in the press around how it can be done differently. Not just telling the downside, but how it can be done differently. Because why would you knowingly go and buy a product that had bad chemistry in it and put it on your family or expose your family to it? I don't think anybody really wants to do that. I think a lot of times we just don't do a good job of telling the story as to why they need to do different.
Okay, did it answer your question? Excellent. There's one thing connected to that, which is you showed all the different labels that exist, but these labels are not to be found on clothing as of yet. Is that something that you're hinting at or striving at to really turn that into reality?
Well, some of them are.
Okay.
I work for a company who helps to label product. There's good and bad of labels. You have to really know what's behind it.
Yes.
But I do think that labels help make that case with the consumer. And it really will depend on markets. I know in Germany some labels are really well respected. In the US, people have never heard of them.
Right.
So I do think we have our own work cut out for us to tell the story.
Okay.
But we also have to tell it in a way that has some substance behind it, some integrity.
Right, but how, as a consumer, as somebody who buys these products, how can I find out whether it's sustainable, whether it's green chemistry behind it or not? Is there any way I could do that? Is there a list that you provide of retailers or companies or even brands that stick to the pattern?
Yeah, I think a lot of us are starting to tell the story at the consumer level, at the point of purchase. I think there'll be more and more of that, but we really do need the consumer to engage. They have to care about it enough to where they'll go do some research. But we also have to make it easy enough for them to go and do it.
Okay, excellent. Any further questions from the audience? Whatever you wanted to know about how sustainable your clothing is, now is the time to find out. You can even send in not your underwear, no. So let's see. Is there anything you want to know before I start rattling off a couple of other questions? Anything from anywhere? He just takes pictures? Good. Because there's actually one major thing that sort of I was moving around in my head is you worked with Nike beforehand. We're not going to touch that, but what is so interesting is you sort of flipped your perspective 180 degrees at least, because now you're on the side that looks at Nike and not from inside out. So what changed in your perception from moving from a retailer or for somebody who creates the products from somebody to consult companies that produce?
You know, it's funny. We were having this conversation right before. It's funny the twists and turns your career takes, and honestly, maybe everyone feels this way, but to me, I feel like every job I've ever had leads to the next one.
Okay.
I started out in aerospace and learned about processing and analytical and environmental. Then I went to an EPA research facility. I learned a lot about techniques, and then I was consulting for an engineering company, which then led me to a product issue that got me my job there. I established our restricted substance list program, tried to move into a proactive stage, which brings me to green chemistry, and then on into innovation. And what I'm doing right now, I think, takes all of that together.
Right.
And it does it for more than just a single company.
Okay.
It does it for, it provides the framework to make it easier for a supply chain to engage, not just one brand. And the really good thing about that is if we can tell the story right and create the right tools for people, it makes, and for people, companies, and manufacturers, it makes it easier for them to adopt some of this stuff, because our supply chains continue to get bigger and bigger, and the technical expertise in them continues to be diluted.
Right.
There's just not enough people. There's not enough nerds, to be honest. And so that's a role I think I can fill, being a nerd.
Excellent. Now, one last thing that sort of is maybe something for the audience as well. Obviously, at Covestro, they sort of go in line with your way of thinking, and we'll see products later during the fashion slot that we have at 3 p.m. So if you want to come back 3 p.m., you see real 3D printed clothes. And they really absorb your way of thinking. Other brands might not, or other producers might not. Is there anything that we, as the consumers, could do to make life easier for Covestro to really persuade the producers to stick to green chemistry? So like a take-home message for us to really sort of work on.
Well, I think a lot of it, what would be ideal is if when people go and purchase products, they really paid attention to what they were buying.
Okay.
The challenge there is to know where the materials come from for the products that you're buying. I think we have our greatest successes when somehow the consumer is brought to the level where they are really trying to intelligently buy their product. The challenge is to not have a label that's bigger than the product itself. So as consumers, I think just educate yourself and really look into what you're using, because not everything is comparable.
Okay, because the shops are open on Sunday in Düsseldorf, so give it a go and just ask them, is this green chemistry that went into this jacket, into this pair of shoes? And be surprised by their surprise, because it's a start to really stun people into thinking about new ways of coming up with green chemistry. I say thank you very much to you, and of course to you for listening and for being here. Thank you very much. Great. Thank you very much, John Frazier. So I don't have much to say apart from it would be great to see you all here again at 3 p.m. Okay, yes? Okay? That's a promise. Just kidding. Okay, have a great day. Bye-bye.